the rise and fall of the Silent Hill games, as well as discussing the future of the franchise. It wouldn't be a stretch if we said that the Silent Hill franchise is probably one of the most mistreated games in the history of video games. Ever since the first game was released in 1999, there have been several others that followed over the years. However, barring the first few, and an occasional surprise here and there, the franchise is brimming with gallant failures. When the first Silent Hill game was released on the original PlayStation, Konami, the publisher, was regarded as one of the best in the business. The idea of such a mature psychological horror game, with its remarkable style and aesthetics, made us expect an endless line of successful follow-ups. But what actually happened was that Konami simply outsourced the franchise to Western developers who could not do justice to their original content. We do have some fond and haunting memories of some remarkable games in the series, but we also have the painful experience of poor storylines that lack any sort of visual imagination. So, in this video, we will explore the miraculous rise and the irresponsible fall of this unforgettable franchise. We will also discuss the chances of a future game, while we take you through the best and the worst of the Silent Hill games. What is so special about Silent Hill games? Okay, before we take you through the games, let us first look into the basic structure of the Silent Hill franchise. The perfect premise of a haunting town is kept constant, and all that keeps changing are the cursed and broken people that it lures in. The disturbing creatures and the imaginative horror takes things to the next level, and the very charm of the game lies in the unexpected moments that send a shiver down your spine. At its core, Silent Hill focuses on all that is wrong with society and humanity. It takes you through the dark and evil side of humans, and how they are the true monsters. Fans also love the heavy symbolism, disturbing imagery, and above all, the psychological horror that stays with you long after you've finished playing the game. Silent Hill, 1999. This iconic survival horror game was developed by Team Silent and published by Konami for the PlayStation. The game opens with Harry Mason driving to the town called Silent Hill with his adopted daughter Cheryl. Suddenly, a girl appears on the road, and to avoid hitting her, Harry swerves uncontrollably and crashes. He is knocked unconscious, but when he wakes up, he finds that his daughter has gone missing. Harry looks for her and begins exploring the town, which seems to be abandoned and is unusually foggy and snowy. The gameplay consists of exploration, combat, and puzzle solving, and Harry eventually uncovers a cult that is conducting a ritual to revive a deity that it worships. There are 4 different endings, depending on you and the choices you make during the game. This game uses a third-person view, with real-time rendering of 3D environments. The console hardware had its limitations, but the developers cleverly used darkness and fog to muddle the graphics. Usually, survival horror games come with a heroic protagonist, with combat training. But the player character here is a simple common man. To think that a ragtag group, randomly made up of people who failed at other projects, made this brilliant game is quite simply mind-blowing. It is easily one of the creepiest and most disturbing games that you will ever come across. The use of lighting effects and frightening sounds are unnerving for the gamer, and the focus is always on the subtle, disturbing things. It is not your typical zombie blasting, monster smashing fest, and you'll experience the simplistic chills that can leave you quite scarred. In the course of the gameplay, you'll be exploring 6 main locations, such as the school, hospital, the church, the docks, the amusement park, and the sewers. Each place has its own haunting secrets, and for us, the level in the sewers stood out. The very idea of navigating through dark tunnels as you hear sounds of murderous creatures is scary enough. The monsters are scary as hell, and everything from a knife-wielding children to the gorilla-like things will make you jump out of your seat. There are so many mysteries in this narrative, and you never know for sure what is going to happen. The best way to play this game is to have a friend over, because you, alone in the dark room, well, things can lead to a cardiac arrest out of shock. Silent Hill is regarded as one of the scariest games ever made, and it deserved every cent of the fortune that it made as an extremely popular game. Silent Hill 2, 2001. Team Silent Hill is now a force to be reckoned with. After the massive success of the first game, they made Silent Hill 2 for the PlayStation 2. This story is not directly linked to the events of the first Silent Hill, but there is a backstory from the town that is quite interesting. James Sunderland has been in the state of depression ever since he lost his wife to a strange disease. Out of the blue, he receives a mysterious letter from his late wife. The letter tells him to go and meet her at their special place in Silent Hill. This used to be their favorite vacation spot when they were married, and he is quite intrigued by the letter. It prompts him to take a trip to the town of Silent Hill, but soon he finds out that there are some deep dark secrets of this place. As he sinks into the unknown, it is no longer about what brought him there. The question now is if he'll manage to get out alive. The narrative was inspired by the works of David Cronenberg, Alfred Hitchcock, and other prominent directors, and the psychological elements were maddeningly scary. We love how this game is very different from the first one, and yet it retains the intrinsic quality of the game, that type of psychological horror. You'd be immediately drawn into the creepy and distinctive atmosphere of this game, and it is quite impressive on every level. Very few games have characters that seem as real as this game made it. James, for instance, does not have any superpowers, and his fight for survival gets to the player. The visuals are also surreal, and the graphics are quite impressive, even by today's standards. The deep and emotional storyline will tie you to the narrative, and the gameplay is well balanced with action and puzzles. The unexpected twist at the end comes as a massive shock, and the truth about the town's horribly mutated monstrous inhabitants is no less than a nightmare. This game develops the characters better than the first one, and for many, this is the best Silent Hill game to ever be made. We won't go into the debate, but the game clearly has a strange theme of dealing with the ghosts of your past, and it gets to you no matter how tough you are. By the end of the game, there are still a few unanswered questions, but that is all part of the charm in this eerie gameplay. Silent Hill 3, 2003. So far so good. The series retains its brilliance yet another time with Silent Hill 3, which was also released by Konami for the PlayStation 2. It was a direct sequel to the first Silent Hill game, and the game was developed almost simultaneously alongside Silent Hill 4, The Room. The game is premised in the fictional universe of the Silent Hill series, and it starts off with a girl named Heather Morris, who is experiencing a terrible nightmare. She wakes up in a burger restaurant inside a mall.
What a nightmare.
However, she is soon comforted by a private detective, who claims to have some information about her birth.
My daddy always told me not to talk to strangers.
This is very important. It's about your birth.
She ends up on the other side of the mall that is filled with monsters and other terrible things. She also meets a mysterious woman named Claudia, who sets up the detective to find her. Heather manages to escape from the mall, and when she gets home, she finds out that her father had been murdered. Now, she heads to the town of Silent Hill, where Claudia said she would wait for her. It turns out that she is the reincarnation of the girl, who was originally intended to birth the cult's god in the town.
You will birth a god and build an eternal paradise.
This is a game that you will long for and fear at the same time, in classic Silent Hill style. The narrative is seriously messed up and unbelievably creepy right from the beginning till the very end. Our protagonist here is a young girl who looks like any other young lady with sleep disabilities. You will feel terrible for her throughout the game and want to survive the nightmarish Silent Hill. The story is a perfect sequel to the first game, and the writing is top-notch for this one. We loved the creature designs, and the movements of the monsters were spot on as well. There is the typical musical score that you would associate with the Silent Hill game, and it goes perfectly with the gloomy atmosphere created by the narrative. It might not be as good as the first two games in the series, but it certainly lives up to the expectations with the same haunting gameplay. It is a game that begs to be played and replayed over and over again, because you cannot simply get enough of the madness that unfolds around you. Silent Hill 4, The Room. This is the last game of the franchise to be developed by Team Silent, and following the release of Silent Hill 4, The Room, the group had disbanded. The game was released for PlayStation 2, Xbox, and Microsoft Windows, and it features an altered gameplay style with third-person navigation. The plot centers around Henry Townsend, who has moved into an apartment in Ashfield. He has recurring nightmares, and one fine day, he wakes up and discovers that his apartment has been bolted shut from the inside. He is trapped inside the creepy apartment room and tries calling out for help in vain. There is no one to hear him, and his only escape is through a portal-like hole that is opened up in his bathroom. Once he enters this portal, it takes him to strange places with dark secrets. He encounters unspeakable acts of murder, terrifying monsters, and he desperately wants to find a way out of this apartment, which is being taken over by evil forces. It is a rather unusual story in the franchise because it moves from the usual theme of the Silent Hill games. Instead of the familiar spine-chilling horror, this time you will experience uneasiness and anxiety throughout the course of the game. This does not take place in the town of Silent Hill, but the references are still there. It does have some strange and psychotic creatures, and there are some extreme sequences that you have to go through. The graphics and sound effects are simply superb, and the atmosphere is overwhelmingly dark. You must be prepared to handle this emotionally taxing story and soak in all the artistic horror that comes your way. There are some minor flaws as well. For instance, the awkward 3D controls and the same inventory limit can be quite annoying. The puzzles are not challenging enough this time around, and that can be very disappointing for the authentic Silent Hill fans. However, we must add that the scares and the overall experience more than make up for these issues. In short, Silent Hill 4, The Room, might not be as good as the first three, but is still a lot better than these games we have to follow.
You okay?
Silent Hill Origins, 2007. The development of the game went from Team Silent to Climax Action. This game was published by Konami for PlayStation Portable and PlayStation 2. The story takes place many years before the events of the first game. Travis is a truck driver who drives past Silent Hill to use it as a shortcut. Suddenly, the spirit manifestation of Elisa comes before his truck, causing him to swerve it and avoid a collision. He comes upon a burning house and rescues the real Elisa, the one who is immolated according to the ritual to impregnate her with the cult's god. As Travis tries to find out if she survived, his repressed childhood memories begin to torment him. He faces some hideous monsters, and in the course of his journey through the city, many secrets are revealed about the history of the town. The epitome of psychological horror now tones itself down a notch, and it is simply due to the callousness of Konami. In itself, this is not a terrible game, but it pales in comparison to the first few games. The game lacks the complexity and darkness that was such an intrinsic element of the first few games. You don't feel the oppressive horror, and you're not bogged down by the subtle creepiness that was the hallmark of the franchise. The gameplay is considerably shorter, and things get over before you can soak up the ambiance. However, it is not all bad, and we did like the typical scares and a few of the puzzles. There are some nasty creatures that had to be defeated, and these are the things that we associate with the charm of the Silent Hill games. The graphics are pretty nice, and we really liked the extra addition of improved combat while fighting the enemies. One thing that really hurts the gameplay, however, is the lack of camera control, and the choice of angles is not up to the mark. This game does come with some graphic and gory content, and the Silent Hill fans might just find it an average entry into the series. For us, this was the beginning of the end, and the franchise seldom recovered from the downfall. Silent Hill Homecoming, 2008. This is where the franchise started to be juggled by multiple developers. This game was developed by Double Helix Games, and was released for the PS3, Xbox 360, and Microsoft Windows. Alex Shepard is a soldier who has come back from war, and his days were spent in a military hospital. He has now disturbing dreams about his young brother, and he decides to head back to his hometown in Shepherd's Glen. However, upon his arrival, he finds that the city is nearly abandoned. His mother is in a nearly catatonic state, and his father and brother are both missing.
Everyone's gone.
He desperately tries to look for them throughout the town, but it soon dawns on him that the town is not the same as the one he left behind. Silent Hill might be the one behind all the mysterious incidents. We know that the name reads Silent Hill, but the true fans are bound to be disappointed with this one. It is nowhere close to the awesomeness that Silent Hill games promised back in the heyday, and the claustrophobic and psychologically damaging theme is missing. It borrows quite heavily from the movie, and the game feels more like Resident Evil than Silent Hill. There are a few interesting ideas here and there, and the creature designs continue to be a bright point in the gameplay. It also has a haunting music score that syncs perfectly with the narrative. However, the lack of any real horror definitely hurts the game big time. It was shocking to see a Silent Hill game without the graphics that defined the series. It is probably one of the goriest games of the franchise, but without the mystery and uncertainty of the unknown, the gameplay just falls flat. What we loved about the Silent Hill games was how we had no clue about what was lurking around the next corner. That element is absent, and as a player, you will never be unnerved by the events. This game is as scary as a blanket full of puppies. The locations were simply awful, and one can hardly distinguish between them. As someone who never played Silent Hill, this might be a decent game, but for the hardcore fans, this will prove to be quite the bummer. Silent Hill Shattered Memories, 2009. This time, the development of the game was handled by Climax Studios, and Konami released it for the PlayStation 2 as well as the PlayStation Portable. In a way, this game is a reimagination of the first game, and it retains the same premise. It uses the same Silent Hill formula to tell the story of Harry Mason. When he wakes up, he finds that his daughter Cheryl is missing.
Cheryl! Cheryl!
He goes looking for her all over the mysterious town of Silent Hill. This is when he's greeted with some nasty secrets that were better left untouched. To be honest, this game was like a new ray of hope for the Silent Hill fans. Climax Studios did a great job of bringing back the authenticity of the game, and the game comes with the same gorgeous graphics that the series was known for. It is certainly a very competent reimagining of the original game, and the eerie music helps its cause. As for the gameplay, the flashlight mechanics are bang on point, and it feels natural as it enhances an already detailed world of shadows and snow. Some people might be put off by the fact that there is almost no fighting in the game, but it does ramp up the constant tension that you're feeling while playing it. We loved the voice acting, and it added depth to the characters. Though Silent Hill Homecoming had a bland and predictable twist, this one comes with a complicated and deep twist that shocks the player. If we had one thing to complain about, it would be that the monsters only appear during the Otherworld chase sequence, thus making it somewhat predictable. This game showed a new direction where Silent Hill could be headed, but unfortunately, the makers soon messed things up pretty quickly. Silent Hill Downpour, 2012. The developers have changed once again, and this time, the game was developed by Vatra Games and published by Konami for the PlayStation 3 as well as the Xbox 360. This time, the game takes a nasty route and brings in a convict in the middle of the foggy, mysterious world of Silent Hill. Murphy Pendleton is being transported in a prison van when suddenly it crashes on the outskirts of the town. He finds himself all alone in the woods and starts to wander around, exploring the region. Murphy seems to be the only survivor of the crash, and this is his chance for freedom. However, Annie, the lady in charge of the transfer, is also around, and she starts to look for him. You all know what to expect because they're both in the vicinity of Silent Hill. Once again, we must start by saying that this game might be considered to be a decent effort if you don't begin to compare it with the gems of the Silent Hill franchise. The ambiance is right there on offer, and the game tries its best to return to its roots. The focus is no longer on combat, and the story definitely has a certain edge to it. We also have a new mix of characters, the likes of which we have never really seen in the previous games. The character of Murphy in particular is quite intriguing as a criminal with a dark past. So where does this game fall apart? Well, firstly, the horror element is considerably low, and the fans of the franchise will know this at first glance. It is almost like the game is utterly brilliant at times, and then tragically flawed all of a sudden. The graphics are quite mixed as well, and the visuals surely haven't improved from the previous game. The monsters are certainly one of the weak points of the game. The controls are not anything to write home about, and overall, this game is, at best, a bit of a tease. Silent Hill set the bar so high that unfortunately, most of the later games simply fumbled trying to keep up. Fall of Silent Hill franchise. Back in 1996, Konami had formed a team with Team Silent, and it was led by the director Kiichiro Toyama, who later went on to create the Siren series. This team was comprised of staff who failed at other projects, and it was merely supposed to be their last chance before getting fired. When they collectively came up with Silent Hill, everyone was surprised, and the massive commercial success warranted them 3 more games. They developed Silent Hill 2, Silent Hill 3, and Silent Hill 4, The Room. And after that last one didn't work out as well as expected, the team was disbanded. This is where things went downhill for Silent Hill as a franchise. The Western developers like Double Helix and Climax failed to build up the same spooky ambiance, and the subtle approach to horror that pleased the fans was missing. They released several games, but few managed to impress gamers. While these weren't unplayable or terrible, they still lacked the essence that made the initial games so great. Konami is surely to be blamed here, because they had no clue as to how to preserve the greatness of the franchise. There was a chance to revive the franchise, and there was a thought to get together Metal Gear Solid creator Hideo Kojima, horror manga artist Juni Ito, and the director Guillermo del Toro for the sequel called Silent Hills. However, this project was quickly cancelled, and the only good chance to save the series was lost. What is the future of the Silent Hill franchise? Well, as of now, the future doesn't look great, folks. Clearly, Konami is not the one to do justice to the potential of this franchise. Our only hope is if they give Silent Hill to someone worthy like Red Candle Games. They have proved their talent through the horror masterpieces Devotion and Detention, and we believe that Silent Hill would shine in the right hands. Unfortunately, it is far from happening. Apparently, Blooper Team, a preposterous studio, has entered into a partnership with Konami. If they are handled the responsibility of developing a Silent Hill game, God help the future. Is any Silent Hill game better than no Silent Hill game? Well, it's a no for us. But there are fans who beg to differ. If a new Silent Hill game is released, it might just reignite the interest in the franchise, and we might expect some better games in the future. However, with the project alongside Hideo Kojima being cancelled, the chances are looking quite bleak. At present, there is no such news to look forward to, so unfortunately it's a future that's as dark as the town of Silent Hill.